Every night, just before you fall asleep, something extraordinary happens, yet almost nobody notices it. In those final moments, your conscious mind begins to fade. The voice you use to control your thoughts becomes quieter, and something much older, much deeper, quietly takes over. Most people believe tomorrow is created by what they do during the day. But what if that's completely wrong? What if the person you become tomorrow is actually decided in the last 10 minutes before you fall asleep tonight? Think about it. Why do the same fears return every morning? Why do the same emotional patterns repeat? Year after year, relationship after relationship. Why does life often feel like you're trapped in an invisible loop, one you can sense but never quite see? The answer isn't hiding in your daytime habits. It's hiding in the silent conversation your unconscious has with you every single night. Tonight, you'll discover why the moments before sleep are the most psychologically powerful moments of your entire day, and how changing just one habit before closing your eyes can slowly transform the way you think, feel, and live. Stay until the end, because the final lessons may completely change the way you go to bed forever. Close your eyes for a moment. Not yet fully, just halfway. Feel how the room softens. Feel how the noise of the world begins to blur at the edges. This is where we begin, not in the light of day, where you perform, where you explain yourself, where you wear the mask you've worn since childhood. We begin in the dark, because the dark is where the truth lives. There is a moment every single night that you have lived through thousands of times, and yet you have never once truly watched it happen. It is the moment your conscious mind, the part of you that argues, plans, judges, and controls, finally lets go of the wheel. Psychologists call this hypnagogia, the threshold between waking and sleeping. But long before it had a clinical name, an old Swiss psychiatrist gave it a much more haunting description. He called it the descent. The moment the ego, tired from a full day of defending its identity, quietly steps aside, and something ancient rises to take its place. You have felt this before. You know this moment. It's the moment a thought arrives that you didn't choose to think. A memory surfaces from nowhere. A face you tried to forget appears behind your eyelids. A feeling you buried at 9 in the morning finally has the silence it needs to speak. And in that instant, whether you realize it or not, you are no longer in control. You are being visited. Carl Jung spent his entire life studying this threshold because he understood something most people still refused to accept. The conscious mind, the I that says, "My name is this, my job is this, my personality is this," is only a small flickering light on the surface of an enormous, dark ocean. During the day, that light is bright enough to convince you it's the only thing that exists. But at night, when the light dims, the ocean beneath you doesn't disappear. It simply waits. And when your guard finally drops, it rises to meet you. This is why nighttime emotions feel so much stronger than daytime emotions. You've experienced this. A worry that seemed manageable at 3 in the afternoon suddenly feels unbearable at 11 at night. A small comment someone made hours ago replays in your mind, growing heavier with every replay. This isn't weakness. This isn't your imagination exaggerating things. This is your unconscious mind, finally given the silence it was denied all day, showing you what it's actually been carrying. Because here is the truth almost nobody tells you. Your unconscious mind never sleeps. It never clocks out. It never takes a break from processing what you refuse to feel. Every unresolved emotion, every suppressed fear, every argument you swallowed instead of speaking, every grief you postponed because you had a meeting to attend, it doesn't vanish just because you distracted yourself with a screen. It sinks. It waits below the surface, patient, unblinking, and at night, when the noise stops, it rises to be acknowledged. This is the psychology of overnight conditioning, and it explains something that has confused you for years. Why the same fear returns every single morning, dressed differently but unmistakably the same fear. Why you can consciously decide to be more confident, more calm, more patient, and yet by the next evening you find yourself right back where you started. It's because change that only happens in the light of your conscious mind is like writing on water. It looks real for a moment, and then it dissolves, because the deeper current beneath it was never touched. Your unconscious is not your enemy in this. I want you to really hear that. It is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to finish something. Every emotion you avoid during the day doesn't disappear, it gets filed away, unresolved into the only part of you that has the time and the silence to deal with it. Night. And so, without realizing it, you have been outsourcing your emotional healing to the 10 minutes before sleep, without ever consciously choosing to show up for the appointment. This is why silence, real silence, without a phone glowing in your hand, without a show playing in the background, feels almost unbearable to so many people. Because in that silence, something surfaces that you've spent all day trying not to look at. Jung had a word for what surfaces in that darkness. He called it the shadow. The shadow is not evil. Let me be very clear about this, because most people misunderstand it completely. The shadow is simply everything about yourself that you have learned to hide, deny, or disown, in order to be accepted, loved, or safe. The anger you were told was inappropriate, the sadness you were told to get over, the desires you were taught to be ashamed of, the fear you were told a strong person shouldn't have. None of these things disappeared when you pushed them down. They simply moved into the dark, and they have been waiting there ever since, for the one moment each day, when the lights go out, and you can no longer distract yourself from them. This is why, in the stillness right before sleep, you sometimes feel a wave of anxiety with no clear cause, or a wash of sadness that seems to come from nowhere. It isn't from nowhere. It's from exactly where you left it, unfinished, unspoken, unfelt. And the shadow doesn't want to destroy you by showing up like this. That's the part almost nobody understands. The shadow wants to be seen, because what is seen can finally be integrated, and what is integrated no longer needs to control you from the dark. Right now, I want you to notice something happening in your own body as you listen to this. A subtle recognition, a quiet nod somewhere beneath your thoughts, because some part of you has known this for a long time, even if you never had the words for it. And this brings us to the second secret of those final 10 minutes, one even more powerful than the emotions that surface. The last image your mind holds onto before you fall asleep doesn't just fade away into nothing. It becomes a kind of instruction, a quiet, wordless command that your unconscious carries with it into the night, and often into the shape of the next day. Think about the last thing you usually picture before sleep. Is it a worry about tomorrow's meeting? Is it a replay of an argument from 3 years ago? Is it your own face, from your own eyes, tired, frustrated, not enough? Whatever image plays last, before the light finally goes out, is the image your unconscious mind rehearses in the dark, over and over and over again, until it stops feeling like a memory and starts feeling like an identity. This is not poetry. This is how the mind actually works. Neuroscience now confirms what Jung intuited nearly a century ago, that the brain does not clearly distinguish between a vividly imagined scene and a lived one. The same regions light up, the same emotional pathways fire, and so, when you close your eyes each night replaying failure, replaying rejection, replaying the version of you that isn't good enough, you are not simply remembering your identity. You are rehearsing it. You are giving your unconscious mind a script and asking it quietly, faithfully, to perform that same role again tomorrow. This is why the same story keeps repeating in your life. Not because the universe is cruel, and not because you are broken, but because every night, without knowing it, you have been directing the same play, casting yourself in the same part, feeding your deepest mind the same final scene. And your unconscious, loyal, obedient, and utterly literal, simply does what it has always done. It delivers to you tomorrow the self you rehearsed tonight. But here is where the descent becomes an invitation instead of a warning, because if the last image before sleep becomes instruction, then it can be rewritten. Not through force, not through gritted teeth positive thinking shouted at yourself in a mirror. That's a daytime tactic, and the unconscious mind, ancient and unimpressed by willpower, rarely listens to commands. It listens to pictures. It listens to feeling. It listens to what you dwell on when you think no one, not even you, is watching closely. This is the invisible programming of tomorrow. While your body rests, your unconscious mind is not idle. It is sorting, encoding, reinforcing. It is deciding which version of you gets strengthened and which fades. Psychologists studying memory consolidation have found that the brain replays and reinforces emotionally charged experiences during the earliest stages of sleep, carving them deeper into the architecture of who you are, which means the emotional tone you fall asleep in isn't neutral, it's foundational. Fall asleep in dread and you are laying a foundation of dread. Fall asleep in low-grade self-contempt, and you are quietly reinforcing a self that believes it deserves contempt. Not through some mystical law, through neurology, through repetition, through the oldest mechanism the mind has for learning anything at all. This is why repeated nights create repeated lives. A single restless night of anxious falling asleep won't define you, but 300 of them will. A single evening of numbing out in front of a screen won't shape your identity. But if it becomes the last conscious act of nearly every day for years, it becomes something far more permanent than a habit. It becomes personality. You didn't fail to change. You simply changed in the direction you were unconsciously rehearsing. Night after night, without ever realizing the rehearsal was happening at all. So let this land for a moment. Somewhere beneath the part of you reading these words, an older, quieter intelligence is listening too. And it already recognizes what I'm about to say next, because it has been waiting a long time for you to understand it. Jung believed the deepest task of a human life was not to become perfect, it was to become whole. He called this process individuation, the slow, often uncomfortable journey of gathering back all the fragments of yourself that you exiled in order to be acceptable to others, the anger you weren't allowed to show, the needs you learned to silence, the tenderness you decided was too dangerous to reveal. Wholeness doesn't mean fixing these parts. It means finally welcoming them home. And remarkably, every single night offers you a small, quiet doorway back to that wholeness. Because in the 10 minutes before sleep, when the ego finally loosens its grip, you are closer to your unconscious than at almost any other moment in your waking life. This is not a curse. This is an opportunity most people sleepwalk straight past, night after night, for their entire lives. Real transformation, the kind that actually holds, is almost never loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic breakthrough, no matter what the story-driven part of your mind wants to believe. It happens in 10 quiet minutes, repeated with honesty, night after night, until the story your unconscious tells about who you are begins, slowly, to change its shape. So here, at last, is the practice. Simple enough to remember in the dark, powerful enough to reshape the architecture of your inner life if you let it become ritual rather than another item on a list. First, the phone goes down, well before those final minutes arrive, because a mind still absorbing notifications and comparison and noise cannot hear its own depths. Second, in the stillness, you do something almost nobody is taught to do. You simply observe your emotional state, without editing it, without performing it, without deciding it's wrong. You ask quietly, what am I actually feeling right now underneath the thoughts? Third, whatever arises, you do not suppress it, and you do not spiral into it. You acknowledge it. You let it exist in the room with you for a moment, the way you'd let an old friend sit down, without needing them to explain themselves. And finally, you consciously choose the last image, the last feeling, the last inner sentence you allow yourself to dwell on, understanding now that this is not a small choice. It is an instruction to the part of you that builds tomorrow while you rest. This is not about forcing happiness before bed. Forced happiness is just another mask, and your unconscious sees through masks instantly. This is about honesty first, and direction second. Feel what is true. Then gently choose what you want to grow. Because here is the deepest truth, hidden inside everything we've walked through together tonight. You have spent your whole life believing that tomorrow is built by what you do after you wake up. The alarm, the coffee, the plans, the willpower. But the architecture was already being drawn hours earlier. In the dark, in the silence, in the 10 minutes you barely noticed passing. Every night is not an ending. It is a new beginning disguised as an ending. Your future self is not waiting for you somewhere out in the busyness of tomorrow. He or she is being quietly written tonight in the space between your last waking thought and your first dream. So tonight, when the room goes dark and the noise of the day finally starts to fade, remember this moment. Remember that you are standing at the doorway between who you have been and who you are about to become. And know that for the first time, perhaps, you are no longer sleepwalking through that doorway. You are finally awake. right at the one moment in every day when almost no one else is.